Welcome to ENside Politics, the weekly podcast on all things politics in San Antonio. I'm Greg Jefferson, Metro Editor of the San Antonio Express News. I'm joined today by City Hall reporter Molly Smith.
Hello. Political
consultant Laura Barberena of Viva Politics. Welcome.
Howdy.
Hey. All right.
Happy New Year.
Is it a Happy New Year? We're going to get to that in a moment. I think every media outlet, including the Express News, we've beaten 2024 to death. Best of, worst of, all of that.
The scandal.
So, the scandal.
Scandal.
We covered this.
I'm very disappointed I wasn't invited to the scandal episode.
You'll be there next year. Don't worry about it. You might be the scandal.
Ouch.
Next year. Who knows?
Careful.
Anyway, so we're going to look ahead in this podcast. So let's start with you, Laura. What's the big thing in San Antonio politics?
Before we get there, I think we need to talk about self-care. Because this is just like 2020.
Oh, you have a new self-care regime, don't you?
I do.
Laura, let's hear all about it.
I don't recommend this. But we got a puppy. Like, why did we get a puppy?
If you told me that was the self-care, nah.
We got a puppy. Like, who gets a puppy? Like, in the midst of all the fires and changing of the guard at DC, and you get a puppy, and it's a wonderful distraction. You play tug of war. There's a little poop and pee pickup. But other than that, it does sort of take me to a happy place.
Really?
Yes, it takes me to a happy place.
Okay.
Well, there's a little tequila in there as well.
Meditation.
But the puppy is a very nice distraction for what's ahead, at least for in 30-minute increments, because he's a little handful. But
what's his name?
Pilo.
Oh.
Yeah, he's a rescue from the east side. Found him on the street, quite literally, and we were going to take him to ACS, and then one thing happened, and the next thing happened, and now we have a dog.
Is that your only pet?
Pilo. Yeah, it's our only pet. We've been petless for about a year and a half. Anthony said we got our pet tubes tied, and this was an unplanned pet pregnancy. So it's a nice distraction to kind of get away from what's ahead, because it is kind of scary. I mean, you turn on the news and it's literally fire. And you're like, what? It's crazy. And so, part of that self-care was I'm going to be in LA next weekend, because part of the self-care is I don't want to be around a television on the 20th. So we were going to go to Universal Studios just to kind of like unplug and not see any TV or media.
Great move.
And except they closed it last week for 2 days. And I'm like, what the? So self-care and department not doing too good.
If you're wanting to unplug, I'd suggest maybe going somewhere else.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. So anyway, the world is on fire, which is very scary, and there's a lot going on. When I'm looking at 2025, I'm thinking, what in the world? Like, we started off this year, and I feel like it's Crazyville, right? From the fires to the Gulf of America to the first, convicted felon president to, it just goes on and on and on and on. And so I think we're going to have to buckle up. This is going to be an interesting year. As I like to say, it's not going to be a train, it's a roller coaster. So let's hang on tight and just try to go with the flow. But there's some scary things happening. I think, first of all, just in terms of San Antonio politics and the city of San Antonio, what it means as we situate ourselves at, we are kind of considered a blue city. We do typically vote Democrat, and we have been voting Democrat for a while. But what does that mean in sort of the larger context of we're going to have a very red session coming up? We still don't know who the speaker is, by the way. That's a whole other set of drama. And then we have a change of the guard in D.C. So we've got a Republican administration. And what does that mean for San Antonio?
Right.
And the dollars that come to San Antonio?
Mm-hmm. Well, what do you think that means for San Antonio in federal dollars?
What do I think? So I think it means...
Take, for example, we've been talking about Project Marvel forever, right? It feels like forever. Well, one component of that, and this is just taking a small slice of federal dollars and kind of looking at what happens with that. One part of Project Marvel is kind of reconnecting the east side to downtown, strangely through a land bridge connecting the Alamo Dome to Hemisphere. The Department of Transportation, U.S. Department of Transportation, is paying for the studies going into that. And if it ever, if the studies show, hey, this is totally feasible. Federal dollars were going to pay for a big chunk of that. Is that going to happen now under a Donald Trump?
Yeah, I think things are up in the air. I think a lot of things are up in the air. I think, and that's what makes everything a bit scary, and why looking ahead and having the right leadership in place becomes so critical, and that at all levels of government, right, to make sure that we're leveraging dollars from the national to come back to Texas, because as Texas, we put a lot of money into the federal budget, and to make sure that we get those dollars back is really critical. But I think it doesn't just affect these big transportation infrastructure projects, but it also affects like DEI programs. It affects, immigration. Like, how are we going to pay for, immigrant care if immigrants are coming over? That's going to affect that money. They're going to be spending money in detention centers. If there's this new law that they're talking about, the Lake and Riley Law Act, actually out. It's in the Senate right now, which means essentially it's getting local law enforcement to do federal immigration, and that's going to strain our emergency services here. Like, how are we going to do that? How are we? Police officers are now going to be dealing with immigration federal issues instead of dealing with what they already have a heavy load, right? So, all this stuff is going to ultimately affect what we do and are we able to accomplish as a city. And to that end, emergency services, we're obviously the fires in California are raging. We hear it on television and reading in the newspapers that this is due to climate change, right? So in San Antonio, what can we expect from these severe climate change events that are going to be happening? Well, we know traditionally flood, right? Flood is a big thing in San Antonio. But then you've got hurricanes along the Gulf Coast, which means now you have people coming in from Houston and Corpus and all those areas flooding into San Antonio. And we have to have the resources to make sure that those folks are taken care of when they get here. That's all federal dollars as well, FEMA and all of that. Like that is a very scary prospect.
And I mean, as long as you're talking about climate change, I mean, it's probably worth pointing out that our summers are getting hotter and seemingly longer. Yeah. And the city is only now really beginning to take that seriously. I think the city is kind of experimenting with, cool pavement and heat mitigation, but they're not very far along. And it wouldn't be crazy to think at some point they'll be asking the federal government for some assistance.
Well, and then there's really kind of two-pronged, right? You got to be proactive, right? So what can we do to mitigate some of these temperature things that are happening with cool pavement, more trees, et cetera, et cetera. But then also dealing with it in the here and now, which is opening up the cooling centers, making sure there's and providing water, and all of this stuff costs money. It's not free. How are you going to pay for this? And that's going to be a huge strain. And it's just getting hotter and hotter. And then what happens with the grid? What happens when everything explodes and the world's coming to an end? Oh my God, Greg, what's happening? It's 2025.
Everything's topsy-turvy. Everything's on its head right now. Speaking of which, Henry Cuellar. So nearly a year ago, he looked in desperate shape. He was indicted for bribery in two cases, one originating in Uzbekistan and the other in Mexico. Now, and here we are. He is suddenly the one area congressman who can maybe get a call back from the Trump White House. How have his prospects changed, and is that good for the city?
Well, I mean, it is good for the city because he has communications to those levers of power, and he's always had.
That's kind of a dumb question, right? The guy who can get a call back from the White House. He's probably helpful.
But he's always been able to do that. So this isn't a new thing, right? He's always been one of those congressmen who's been able to talk to folks on the other side, who's been a little bit more conservative, has been accused actually of being really a Republican rather than a Democrat. But at the end of the day, I think his district recognizes the power that he brings and the dollars that he brings back to to the district. So he's been instrumental in bringing a lot of huge federal dollars back to our area, and it's important that we have someone of his stature and his his connections being in the room, because if you're not in the room, what is it? If you're not at the table, you're on the menu, right? So like, so him being there is really, really interesting. And then now you're seeing Vicente Gonzalez, who's also from the Valley, who's also kind of doing some of these moves more towards the Republicans. And in fact, as I mentioned earlier on that Lake and Riley Act that has to do with immigration law, the two of them have come out in support of this.
They voted. Yeah, they voted.
Which is interesting, right? Because, you would think, get in a time machine 5 years ago, like, what? Like, how is this even happening?
But did Cuellar's yes vote, did that surprise you?
No.
It kind of, like, it didn't really surprise me.
No. Vicente, I mean, he's pretty much, we knew that he was going to, be projecting that. And then, and full disclosure, I did get to work on his very first campaign when he ran. He's an really interesting guy. A total rags to riches story. Literally got his GED and then went to community college and got his law degrees. He's a fascinating individual. And it's interesting to watch him kind of change as a congressman, and he's sort of matching the district and almost kind of mirroring Cuellar in a way. It's interesting, but
and Congressman Cuellar could be key for getting funding for the Migrant Resource Center. I mean, he's been the one Congress member who's really kind of pushed for that, and I think that's going to be the open question. I mean, we kind of touched on that, but what's going to happen with the Migrant Resource Center? It's never been open under a Trump administration. It opened in 2022 under Biden. There's always been questions of what's going to happen if the federal dollars close, because it's really entirely funded by FEMA. I think we often hear some council members saying, we don't want, taxpayer dollars going, and they never have. It's, we're reimbursed.
What is the city saying now about its future? Or are they just
the city really is not saying anything. That's always been that kind of their position on the Migrant Resource Center. They don't want to talk about it because it is controversial among some segments of San Antonio's population.
Some heartless individuals. I'm sorry. Commentary right now, there.
They said that
you don't want to provide food, water, and shelter to people seeking asylum in this country. I'm sorry.
Well, they said as of late November, they still had $13 million to use.
Yes.
Unclear how long that'll last them. It really depends how many folks you have coming in. Their numbers have really dropped. But the city's position is we'll keep it open as long as it's needed. They've kind of made no indications that it could close, but I think El Paso County is one example of what could happen. They had a county-funded migrant resource assistance center. It's somewhat different, but it will also help migrants kind of coordinate travel outside of the region. El Paso relies more on kind of these nonprofits, but El Paso in late 2024 closed down their center because they were concerned about whether they would get these FEMA reimbursements, and then they didn't want to be on the hook if the reimbursements didn't come through. So that's going to be interesting for San Antonio. And then as we get new leadership in, there are probably some mayoral candidates who don't believe that this is the city's responsibility to be doing this, that this is the federal government's responsibility. So,
and just so that we're clear, there was I just want to make sure people understand there's a distinction between this Migrant Resource Center and the detention center.
Yes.
That the Trump administration is wanting to put forth. And I think, these are essentially going to be the concentration camps. They are the campaign promise made and done that he was going to deport millions, do these mass deportations, right? And here's the way I see it. Mass deportations, if you say you're going to do it, you have to show that you're going to do it, right? So if you're just sort of mass deporting people willy-nilly, right, sort of like, okay, get on the plane, go, like, where's the visual in that? There isn't one. But if you create a concentration camp, if you create this detention center, it's not a concentration camp technically, but at these detention centers, and you put a whole bunch of people in there, now you run the cameras, ta-da, here's your mass deportation, right? And then they start mass deporting. What will be interesting to see will be how does Mexico and some of these other countries handle this, right? The Mexican president, she's already said, if they're not Mexican, they're not getting off the plane, right? But then what is that going to happen to our workforce, right? Because many of these immigrants that come here looking for jobs, they do these low wage jobs. What are we going to do? So now are we potentially looking at a bracero program again, where we were having people come in from Mexico with these permits to seasonally work, very low wages, and then they go back, right? So are we looking at potentially another bracero program? And that really creates this distinction of the classes. It really creates this other subclass. And, it's scary times ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I just get the feeling that I remember early in the first Trump administration, there were rumors going around the migrant circles in Houston that the federal government was going to crack down on construction sites looking for illegal immigrants. And the industry effectively shut down for days. It might have been over a week. I would not be at all surprised if you see labor disruptions like that here and across Texas early in Trump's second administration, just as things get stirred up and his policy direction isn't really clear yet. There's going to be a lot of ambiguity and a lot of panic.
Yeah. So this raises two really interesting questions for me. One is the new border czar that Trump is assigning, this Tom Homan. So he is like the king of family separations, right? Like that because he's been in immigration for a while, worked under the Obama administration, and under Trump, and is sort of almost seen as the mastermind behind the family separations. And the idea was that if you tell people, if you come as a family, we're going to separate you from your children, that somehow that's going to deter people from coming. I'm not going to sit here and debate whether that works or not. I will say I think it's cruel. That I do think it's cruel and because their thing is, a parent would never separate from their child. I stood at the border in Laredo with the Dreamers coming over. They were coming to seek asylum. This was several years ago when I was working on some academic papers. And I watched a family say goodbye. A father said goodbye to his wife and two daughters. And I watched it. And it was heartbreaking. And they made that decision because all they thought about was what's best for my children. And I'm going to make this sacrifice. It was just horrible. But the other thing that you said, and it just sort of triggered, is this Facebook not doing fact checking. As we look at 2025, this to me is crazy. I saw the best meme yesterday. I can't say it here because I'll give the PG version of it, but it's like, Mark Zuckerberg, who has sex with ostriches, takes away facts checking from Facebook. I thought that was hilarious. But they're moving to this community fact check thing. This is terrifying. What you just said, Houston, the industry shut down. People are going to go online and say crazy stuff. And eventually Community Notes will take it down. But it's going to be out there before the Community Notes thing comes and checks in. And I was like, how does this Community Notes thing work, right? Because first of all, Facebook hasn't said how it's going to work. And the way it works on Twitter is you have people that comment, but you have to be part of this Community Notes community, which you pay for, right? And then there's some algorithm that checks to see how many Community Notes have commented on this. It determines whether or not it's, how vast of a political spectrum have people commented on this. And then the note comes up and says, this is false. But meanwhile, it's been up for however long it takes to do this. And I'm sorry, I don't have time to sit around and, troll Twitter and Facebook to say what's
Actually, you put a way more thought into it than I have, because to me, it's just they're abandoning fact checking, and that's that's really it.
Okay, pretty much. Sorry, I kind of went the long way around.
Thanks for filling us in on all the particulars. But at the end of it,
sorry, I'm just trying to figure out how to fight it. I'm like, I've got my little Jedi,
There's no fighting it.
There is no fighting it. Fact checking is dead. And do you know what that means, though? For everything that we've been talking about, from immigration to federal dollars, people can just say crazy stuff, and it becomes the truth until it's not, which is never.
Hey, that's frankly a great segue into your big thing of 2025, the election.
Yes.
Yes, the election.
Well, I think
probably with the less information.
The big story in San Antonio is going to be who will be our new mayor, and then who our new council will be. And so we have 4 of the 10 council seats are open, meaning that there's not an incumbent on the ballot. So that guarantees that there's going to be 4 new people plus a new mayor. That's 5 of the 11. And that can really shift the direction the city takes. It's, not only new ideas and new programs, but it can be new voting blocks, new alliances. It's
thank God Eric Walsh is still there.
Eric Walsh is still there, the city manager.
Can you imagine
if just got a big raise?
If he'd been capped and then we would have a new city manager as well. That would be wow. But Eric is still there. So that's kind of like somebody.
And here would be a good point at which to say, Laura, you were running
Greg?
one of the mayoral candidates' campaigns. Manny Pelaez. He is the District 8 councilman. So if you could keep your comments on the race global, not really,
of course,
that'd be great. And I think you're doing several council races.
Yes, we're doing several council races.
But I mean, what do you, because Molly's right. It's going to be a very different, it by the numbers, it's going to be a very different council. What are you anticipating come June when the new council is seated?
It's interesting because you have to kind of look what's on the ballot because that determines who's going to be coming to vote. And we kind of mentioned a little bit about Marvel. So, Marvel really will change the makeup of the electorate. Right now, it seems like Marvel's not.
Because at this point, I mean, Molly, bring us up to date.
Sorry.
What's the latest on Project Marvel?
So,
as distinct from the Spurs arena, let's draw that. Separate.
So the Spurs Sports and Entertainment had been pressing the county to call a May venue tax election to help fund the arena. It's one component of Project Marvel, which is that Sports and Entertainment District, but it's one of those components that the city is kind of moving faster on. So the Spurs really wanted to get the county to kind of lock in some dollars by asking voters to approve using the car rental tax and raising the hotel occupancy tax, the county's portion, to help fund this arena. And it was a question last week of whether it would happen. The commissioners met in closed session, and when they came out, Judge Sakai said, we don't have enough information. So if you ask me today, I don't think we're calling a May election.
Yeah, and apparently they're having a couple of community meetings as well.
They are, yes. Yeah. Precinct 4 Commissioner Tommy Calvert, who represents the east side, the area around the Frost Bank Center, said we need community input. One of the county's fears is what's going to happen if we leave the Frost Bank Center vacant.
But community input to what end? I mean, what? I don't know what that means.
Unclear. Right now, it seems like, what do you want the east side to look like when the Spurs are gone?
Yeah.
But I mean, community members can have tons of visions, but I think the question is, who pays for that?
Yeah.
How do you pay for it?
How do you sustain it?
And is there interest of private developers? I mean, it would rely on private developers to have projects in this side of town.
Which they haven't done when the Spurs
was
there.
But anyway, there had been some speculation that there would, because the Spurs were really, they really wanted this, that there would be this venue tax question on the May ballot. Right now, it looks like there's not going to be. The county has until February 14th to call the election. There's a couple things they need to do. But if it doesn't happen, the earliest would be November. And it would be very likely that they would try to meet that deadline. They would have a lot more time to say, this is the price of the arena.
And a November off election year electorate is, I don't know that favors the Spurs arena crowd. I think
why not?
I think it's a little bit more fiscally conservative. Mm-hmm. I think, you got to be I think it's a bigger lift, which I'm not saying they can't do it. It's just going to take more money. I think it's just going to take more money to get people out.
Right. So this is basically what's standing in the way of a May vote looks to be County Judge Peter Sakai. I mean,
and Commissioner Calvert.
Right. Mm-hmm. So both of them have said we need more information. We need, we need to know how much this arena would cost, which seems like
but that's
pretty
also,
basic information.
I'm sorry. Let me count here. That's only 2 votes though, and there's 4 commissioners plus. So you need 3 votes, which leaves Rebecca Clay Flores, Justin Rodriguez,
so you're
and
discounting the county judge's ability to set the agenda.
I don't know. I mean, as you said, I mean, I guess he could set the agenda in terms of putting it on the agenda.
Yeah, right. But I think
isn't that kind of the ultimate power in this case?
I guess so.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that is going to be whether or not it can even be spoken of, going to be put in front of the commissioners.
Let me be totally unfair to you. Laura.
Oh,
Totally unfair.
and full disclosure, I worked on Sakai's campaign.
That's why. That has to do with me being unfair to you. So tell me.
When have you ever been
given your
unfair
close
to me?
associate, and you no longer work for him.
I'm no longer on.
So you're not. Yeah,
I'm no longer his consultant.
You're no longer his consultant. So, given your intimate and deep knowledge of Peter Sakai, what's going through his head right now? Is he showing some iron that he didn't really seem to possess?
I was a little surprised, like when this all kind of happened. I was like, "Whoa, what's going on here?"
What do you think?
Like, setting up for the East Side, that's kind of a.
Is that what's happening?
I think it is. I think he's sort of. I mean, the East Side was good to him in the election. Like the East Side came out for him, and he's always had strong relationships in the East Side, even as a judge, as a district judge. He's always had relationships there, and so I think he's just making good on a promise and making sure that those neighborhoods are taken care of. Right. It's interesting though that it's the Spurs that this is kind of what has ignited it. And I kind of, we sort of said this off the air. It's like, is he playing chicken with the Spurs, right? Because I have said this time and time and time again. I just thoroughly believe that the Spurs can leave. Like, I don't know why people think, oh, they'll never leave. Oh, we've done all this investment. It's like, no, I really think they could leave. Like, I don't know. Why are we fooling ourselves to think that they won't leave? Like, I totally think they will leave. So it's interesting. Maybe he, clearly he has knowledge that I don't. Maybe he's thinks they won't leave, and then he's able to negotiate based on the fact that they'll never leave. When I talk to folks over at the Spurs, they say, we're never going to leave, but I'm like, really? They're talking not just millions, but billions of dollars that you potentially could make in Austin, not just with selling tickets, but the corporate base. I mean, it's so appealing, literally 60 miles up the road or 80 miles up the road. What's to keep them? Or even heck, San Marcos. I'm just thinking, I don't know that we have the kind of leverage that I think he thinks we have, but I'm not a county judge, so I don't know. And I'm not in the room, so I don't know. Yeah. But it does seem seems interesting to me. I mean, right. I'm surprised. I feel like he's sort of standing up for the little guy, which is, a great thing. I just don't know if the little guy has enough leverage here to, it is very much David and Goliath. And I don't know if, does he have that ability to make any movement on this? We'll see. It'd be a great thing. I mean, the East Side needs it. I mean, what he's saying isn't untrue, right? What he's fighting for is, I think, a good thing. It's just, is it a realistic thing? That's the question. Yeah.
Do you remember the under Mayor Julian Castro in 2009, the East Side Initiative? Do you remember that?
Gosh, no, I don't. I don't.
The rhetoric was very similar to what we're hearing now. And surprise, not a lot came out of it.
Right.
So, I'm a little skeptical about what this plan is going to entail.
One of the things that's a little different, because we're now in the here and now in 2025, the scary year, a lot of people are coming to San Antonio now. People are moving here. We're a fast-growing community. They're looking for housing that they can afford. The East Side has got some great properties. So we're now in a very transformative time for San Antonio. So this could be an opportunity where during Castro's time, it wasn't feasible because there wasn't sort of this push of growth. I drove on the East Side the other day. I was like, what? I didn't even recognize there's a bunch of these bungalow houses. Properties have been raised and completely rebuilt. So it's, the East Side is changing a little bit, and you're seeing some outward push for that. It's an opportunity for economic development to happen. So it could be this is the right time. Everything happens in its own time. And so this could be something that we just need to keep an eye out on. But again, it feels weird because nothing major has happened with the Spurs Arena there. But maybe it will come. I don't know. We'll see to see. Oh, but I do want to talk about 2025. This is kind of related to Marvel, kind of related to the East Side is the via transportation and public transportation. That's a huge thing in 2025 for San Antonio. Are we going to grow up and get out of our cars?
No.
Probably not.
No, I mean, and
you seem like you might have your own answer.
Well, we've got new leadership.
You're talking about the green and silver.
Yeah. Okay. So the green line, which is
best rapid transit, north to south and east.
North to south to east to west. But we've got new leadership over there, right? Mm-hmm. We've got John Gary Herrera, who's now the new the new president and CEO, and then we have Laura Cabanella, who I've known Laura. Shout out to Laura. Hey, I'm not going to break the fourth wall. I'm not breaking the fourth wall, but shout out to Laura because I've known Laura.
No, you tell me. You want to? I'll shout out.
Shout out to Laura, please.
Laura. Hey, Laura.
Yeah, I've known her since she was a council aide in District 3. I've known her for quite a long time, and so now she is the new chair of the executive committee. And then Leo Gomez from Brooks has now been named vice chair. So it's going to be very interesting.
It's kind of a powerhouse board.
Yeah. So let's see what happens and if they're able to get people out of their cars and into the buses. And, I travel to other cities and I see the public transportation systems just really working. Mm-hmm. I just wish it would work here. So let's see. I'm gonna hope that it happens and that they can get people on these buses and that we can get people moving.
Yeah. So
get San Antonio moving again. Sounds like a campaign that they ran.
Is transportation at all playing out in the campaigns for council or mayor, or is it too early to say?
I think it's too early to say. I haven't really seen tons of it. Mm-hmm. I think there's so many other issues they're looking at that voters are more interested in. I mean, they're all going to talk about public safety because that's something that's going to get voters out versus transportation, because most San Antonians who are, regular voters are driving their car where they need to get to go. So I haven't really seen it tons.
Yeah.
I'll be really curious if if the current council and maybe some of the newcomers start talking about it as they discuss Project Marvel, because public transportation was a component that was really absent from those discussions. There were questions about, we're going to build a parking garage or we're going to have an off-ramp off of the freeway to get you down there. But they really didn't say, and here's a bus route that, will take you from this area and drop you off right there so you don't have to park.
Well, and as you talk about folks that vote in these elections, seniors, we have a lot of older people who vote in elections. Well, Via now has a Via Link, which is essentially an Uber, which is a super affordable Uber. Now, it's not, you can't catch it from one side and go to the other side of the city, but you can catch it to go pick up your groceries, maybe go to some doctor's appointments in your sector. But they're talking about expanding that. And that's huge to be able to, again, get seniors, people with mobility issues, who can't drive anymore, to get them places. So in that sense, it could start coming up as part of the conversation, just because seniors who have mobility issues are not able to drive. They're able to stay at home, but they're not able to drive their vehicles. So I think that's another thing that you'll start seeing council talk about a little bit as well. But public safety for sure, like that's check, right? Even though statistically, nationally, we know crime is going down.
Yes.
It just seems like,
but no fact checking.
No fact checking. He sleeps with ostriches. I just thought that was hilarious.
I think it will be interesting if any, this could be for the current council or the incoming council, how they deal with the airport. The airport just lost its first
transatlantic flight.
We got it. We lost it. We got it.
In late December, Condor announced that it was canceling the direct flight, which was seasonal between San Antonio and Frankfurt. And kind of now the question is, for so long, the city has focused on getting a flight to Europe. And that's kind of been the vision of the mayor, the current council, and business leaders. And I think the question is, will there be a new strategy? Are they going to keep pushing for this, or will they say, maybe we should look to our neighbors south and try to get more flights into Latin America? What is the strategy? How do we position ourselves?
And this would be the time to do it, given that, you've broken ground on Terminal C, which is going to be this ginormous new terminal, kind of equal in square footage to terminals A and B, and hopefully so much better looking and easier to navigate. I love San Antonio International for ease of use. I've never had an easier time getting through security. But oh my God, it's like the way, Terminal C or Terminal B is like a little, you have to go through this little maze to get into the actual Terminal Concourse, and then Terminal A, of course, is like a little.
You're there.
Well, yeah, like a little rat trap.
You just stepped out. You're there.
But I mean, if the city is going to kind of reconsider how it does, its international flight strategy, now would be the time to do it.
And I think it's just one of these, catch-22 things. Like, you can't bring international business here if there's not an international flight, right? Mm-hmm. Well, and you can't get an international flight because there's no international business here.
Right.
So, like, how do you do this, right? And then how do you do this in a Trump administration where he's been very clearly, sort of America first, anti-foreign government, foreign travel, foreign everything, really. So it's like, how do you navigate this? And so I think, the next mayor really has to think about economic development and how that will create the foundation to be able to bring in these international flights because again, it's who. I'm not flying to Frankfurt. I'm not. That's just not me. But, who is, right? The folks that are doing that are these, are business folks. Maybe people are traveling for leisure. That's not in me. But to really sustain those kinds of flights, you've got to have the business foundation here that's going to call for that. And, we're still that little big city that could, like, we just like we're and there's
like we might not have that foundation,
not yet. And but it's going to happen. I think it's going to happen. It seems like we always feel like we're like 10 years behind Austin. So like I feel like that's like we're due, right? We're due. It's just a matter of getting that leadership in. But I do think what you said, Molly, is really critical, is that Latin America, because looking to Latin America, and one thing that really fascinates me about this particular field of mayoral candidates is we have at least 4 that are fluent Spanish speakers. And so, I think there's some opportunity there to do business with Latin America in a way that we haven't had that opportunity before, to go in and be able to literally speak their language and then see if that is an entree to get more businesses to come here, and then maybe create that foundation.
So this, I'm terrible with dates. It's May 6th?
May 3rd.
May 3rd.
And get ready, because it's during Fiesta Flambeau.
Oh, no, are you kidding me?
No. So
why would they?
Saturday, I know. It's the lunar calendar. It's all crazy. But so the Saturday of voting is the day of the night parade. It's also the day of the King William parade and the Pooch parade. So you're going to have to go from the Pooch parade to go vote.
That's insane.
It is totally insane. And are you ready? Fasten on your seatbelt. We're not going to have Jackie Callan anymore because he's going to be gone. So we're going to have a brand new elections administrator dealing with this. So in the past, and I actually went back and looked, the election, we've had early voting during Fiesta before, but election day has always been the week after Fiesta. This is the first time election day is happening during Fiesta. So good luck getting campaign workers for whoever that new person is that's going to be doing that. That's going to be, Yeah,
they'll have a lot of work to do that night because presumably we'll have many more candidates than we've previously had.
Yes.
We'll see if that's true or not.
Right.
But then I'm talking about, we've had 2 city charter amendments that is, both of which are supposed to be expanding the field of candidates.
Yes.
One increases salary for city council and the mayor. You can go.
Council is now going to get about a little above 70,000.
Yeah.
With incremental raises each year,
which is going to invite a whole lot of people to start running.
Right.
Because right now they're making 45,000. So it is a huge jump.
So it's a huge jump. Then you're not just serving 2 years, you're just
serving
4.
Yeah, so that's the second charter amendment. Yeah, you've now got 4 years as opposed to 2. Somebody could look at that in terms of stability for their own life and say, okay, well, 4 years, it's reasonable.
Yeah. And before it was like, why in the world would anyone be a council person when you were getting $20 a meeting? Like that was that's like you had to literally be, independently wealthy or have 3 other jobs or something to do that. Now you literally can be a council person as your job full time. Like that potential is there. And so I think when you couple that with the mere $100 filing fee, wow, right? And you don't even have to pay that if you get signatures too. So it's just, the barriers to entry on this are pretty low now. So I think you're going to see folks who maybe aspiring aspirations to run for office in their younger years.
When does filing start?
Filing opens Wednesday.
Yes.
And it closes on February 14th.
From what you're hearing and from what you've reported so far. I mean, it seems like you've got maybe
the races are pretty crowded. We just looked at the open races, and nearly all of them, I would say, are going to go to a runoff. I mean, you have 6, 7 people running in some of these races. Some are just seeing 4, but it is a lot of folks and a lot of kind of newer folks. I think part of that is because there's not an incumbent on the ballot. So it's far easier to get elected. It's far easier to get elected when there's no incumbent than to unseat an incumbent.
You got four open seats.
You have 4 open seats.
And then that's not even counting.
That's not even counting the mayor's office.
Yeah. And I'm going to look at my calendar here because I don't want to lie. But the runoff, you're going to love this. It's in June.
Yes.
It is June. I'm looking June 7th. Yeah. So the election will, like, literally, that is like a month. Mm-hmm. So you're going to have 2 weeks, maybe 3, and then early voting will start. So these runoffs are just going to be like, it's going to like flash. Flash. Yeah. It's going to be really fast. Really fast.
So I mean, what do you expect? Like, a lot of candidates will be kind of sitting on cash during the general election.
As a consultant, I made that mistake one time in my career where I hung on to some money thinking, we'll use it in the runoff. Or in that case, it was, we'll use it for the general, and we didn't get out of the primary. And so, no, you got to spend it. You have to spend it, and then you just re-raise it. Because at that point, once the election happens, the fundraising clock starts again. So you can go back to everyone. And that's the other thing, too, is with this extension of, and I've talked about this in other podcasts, with the extension of the terms, it didn't change the fundraising cycles. So it's very difficult to raise money in council races. It just really is. But once the election happens, then basically the clock starts new and everyone can now give again. So you'll see a scramble of folks. And what you're seeing right now in the donor class is like, there's so many people running. We're going to wait till the runoff to give. Well, get ready because there's going to give as you said, there'll probably be a whole lot of runoffs and a whole lot of giving to give in a very short period of time.
Yeah. Now, you'd mentioned that public safety is almost certainly going to be an issue in council and mayor's races because it always is, right? Yeah. But is it going to be? I mean, you've got a police contract coming up after the election, negotiation of a new police contract. I doubt if that's going to be really in itself a campaign topic. Like, I doubt it's going to come up.
Yeah. But the police union is going to spend a lot to get the candidates they want.
Exactly. So
they're going to endorse.
Right. Yeah. So do you see candidates positioning themselves to get the union's endorsement and union volunteers on their campaign and union funding?
I haven't delved into a lot of their policy platforms yet, but definitely. I mean, there was a handful of people who are kind of more interesting candidates that their view of public safety is not hire more police. But I would say most people in most of these races a lot of them want that endorsement. And so they probably will be positioning themselves.
Yeah. I think a lot of candidates would position themselves sort of pro more funding police. And funding not just for more police officers, which is critical in a growing city, but then also to ensure that they have the right equipment.
They're paid well.
Et cetera, et cetera. And then the other thing, and we didn't really talk about this yet, but, Chief McManus, how long is he going to stay around? Like, he left once.
I guess he's retired.
He left once and then came back. But, what if, he potentially could be, I don't know. I haven't spoken to him. So I'm not telling you to leave, Chief. I'm not saying that at all. For a while. But I'm just saying, what if he decides, hey, I'm good, or this new mayor is not somebody that I want to work with, or, whatever. Then we potentially have looking for a new police chief to come in. So that would be very interesting to see how that would play out.
All right. As if you haven't depressed us enough. So
go to the puppy.
We'll end. We're gonna end with you. Your last big thing of 2025. What's going to remake this city for good or bad? Well,
I don't know if this is the big thing, but this is certainly it is a big thing.
Okay.
It's a big, well, okay. Marvel for sure is the big thing. I mean, Marvel is huge. Marvel is transformative. Marvel will, and again, I'm not talking about the Spurs Stadium. I'm talking about the whole, the revitalization of downtown, right? And doing that in a smart way that is authentic to our city, that protects small businesses and homeowners around the area is critical, and ensuring that those things happen. That's a lot. It's just so. We could literally spend podcasts.
It's a hugely complicated project. Right. It's the expansion of the Henry B. Gonzalez Convention Center. It's the major upgrades at Alamo Dome, a second convention center hotel, and potentially a Spurs arena. Right. So it's a lot.
Right. It is a lot. But having said that, I think there's something that's happened that we've kind of not given enough attention to, and that is, the merge of UTSA with UT Health, because that to me is huge. Because there's countless studies that talks about the social determinants of health, right? And these are things that aren't medical, but just sort of your surrounding things that happen that determine how healthy your outcome on life is going to be. But can you imagine, if we could become a premier health center, in the way that Houston has? Talk about bringing in economic development, bringing foreign investment. People would be. This could be a real economic driver for the city if we were to really lean into health and the health industry. And we've got the nursing schools that are now here. We've got land to grow on the south side. We've got new hospitals coming up on the south side. Research is being done here, state of the art research. Could we potentially be the next Houston when it comes to, or even surpass Houston? This is something that I think we really need to look at, because when we talk about these generational gaps in poverty, this is an opportunity. Ensuring that people are healthy is one component that's needed to ensure that we balance out these, class differences. Because if you're not healthy, you can't work, you can't put food on your table. And that is it's something that I think we really need to look at, and I think there's a bright future.
But how do you
bright future?
One thing I think the merger of the two, of University of Texas at San Antonio and the UT Health Science Center, totally makes sense. I'm unclear as to how it brings about better health for lower income neighborhoods. I
don't know that it does. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying we need to, as it grows, we need to be aware of that. We need to make sure, Methodist Healthcare Ministries, which is a nonprofit that makes all their money off of the Methodist hospitals, that is one of their driving forces, right? And if we ensure that these other hospitals are thinking in that way, because they understand that there are these other social factors that affect health, right? And I'm just we need to go into the space with that frame of mind, is what I'm getting at. Okay. So I'm not saying, I'd like to see, I'm being optimistic. Dude, I just got a puppy. I got a puppy. I'm being optimistic here.
I am trying to end this podcast on a positive note. And you're you're unwinding and you're sounding
crazy. Fact check me on that. Fact check me on that.
You need to sound happy. This is optimistic. We're trying to give it a nice bounce at the end.
I am so looking forward to 2025. It's going to be a lot of fun. If local politics are you kind of a small interest in it, get ready, because it is going to get so interesting. I think it's going to be it's going to be drinking from a fire hydrant. There's just going to be so much news going on. There are going to be so many candidates. Once the candidate forums start, it's going to be really interesting. It's been kind of quiet. I'm a little surprised, but there are some candidate forums coming up soon, and I think that's going to make for some really great news and chisme, as we say. So some nice gossip. So it'll be fun. I think I'm
going to end it on gossip, because everybody loves gossip,
everybody
and that's
loves
a good
gossip.
thing. So great.
Gossip and puppies.
I love puppies. Thank you very much for joining us. And if you are one of the dozen or so who have not signed up for the ENside Politics newsletter, just go down to show notes, hit the link, sign up, for God's sakes. Thanks a lot. And we will see you not next week, but the following week. We're taking MLK Day off. Thanks a lot.